call the Minister for Health and Sport.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker, and may I say you're looking very healthy and sporty today. On behalf of the Leader of the House, I move the motion relating to a proposed Select Committee on Regional Development and Decentralisation in the terms in which it appears on the notice paper.
I thank the Minister for Health and Sport. And the question is that the motion moved by the Minister for Health and Sport be agreed to. All those of that opinion say, oh, the member for Indi.
Thank you, Speaker. I would like to add my comments to the ministers and welcome the government's motion here and acknowledge the work of the Prime Minister, the member for Mayo, the Leader of the House and many members of Parliament who we've worked with on this particular motion over the period of time. And I'd particularly like to acknowledge the people of Indi who have asked that this motion be brought to the House, and my staff and the work particularly of Jeremy Meikle for the huge amount of work you've done to thank you for that. I think this is going to be a visionary committee, and I know that the intent is to look at regional development and the future of Australia and the role of decentralisation to assist and support in doing that. There are so many innovative and creative things happening in rural and regional Australia. So many wonderful people doing amazing things, so many communities, projects and issues that can really value add to how the government wants the country to be. We can build connections. And before I address the details of this particular motion, I'd like to share with you, Mr Speaker, a couple of moments of history, if I could. In the 1990s, as chair of the Australian Women or President of Australian Women in Agriculture, I was approached by John Anderson, then Deputy Prime Minister and leader of the National Party, to chair the Regional Women's Advisory Council. This was a national representative council reporting directly to the Deputy Prime Minister on issues of importance to Australia. And as chair of that committee, we did an enormous amount of work of joining up government and talking to the government about how their issues impacted on the lives of people in rural and regional Australia. And our first report was called The Success Factors, and it talked about the success of economic growth and development in rural and regional Australia, and underpinned the next part of the work that I did and many of my colleagues did for the next 15 years, and I have to say directly resulted in me standing to become a Member of Parliament. There was so much wisdom in the success factors about how government and communities can work together, and I'm looking forward to bringing some of that knowledge back to this committee. But before I was involved in Women and Ag, in my earlier life, I was working for the Victorian Department of Agriculture, and the Premier at that time of Victoria was John Cain. And John Cain established a committee called the Rural Affairs Committee of Cabinet, and he brought together some of the key portfolios that impacted on rural and regional Australia. And I had the fortune to be a staff member that worked to that Committee of Cabinet. And I could see the impact that joined-up government had. I could see the impact of partnerships between communities and government. I could see the respectful relationships developed when rural communities better understood how government worked. I could see the capacity building that happened right across rural Victoria. As cabinet ministers came out, they met with communities, they better understood the problem, and then we worked together to actually be solutions-focused. It was a most amazing career for a young countrywoman from a farm to actually get a really good experience of how government works in partnership with communities. And the results were amazing. Right across Victoria, communities came together, people put their hands up to become part of government, they joined committees, the capacity building happened as people understood that they had authority, they had personal power, and government was a partner. And in supporting this particular motion, I'm hoping that we can do the same thing. I'm hoping we can bring government together. I'm hoping we can work with the opposition, and it's so good to have you here today. And I know there's issues about the actual format of the committee, but I'm looking forward to working with the government, with opposition, with my crossbench colleagues, to say what's our vision for rural and regional Australia? How can we actually work together and with government as a partner to do the detailed planning that needs to happen for us to be the shining light, which I believe we can be, for this wonderful country. So before I just come and talk to some of the key aspects of the committee, I really want to acknowledge the work that everybody has put in place to get here today, and particularly for me as an independent to be standing here to put my hand up to be on the committee, and I certainly hope to, but to work with all my rural colleagues, because I know we've got the connections, we've got the links, we've got the what to do this. So just a couple of things about the committee that I think is going to make a really, really big difference. It's going to look at best practice approaches to regional development, considering Australia and international examples, and many of us have got great knowledge of how things work in other countries. We're going to look at decentralisation of Commonwealth entities and functions as a mechanism to increase growth and prosperity in regional areas, and again considering Australia and international examples. And really importantly for me, with my background in business, we're going to look at the actions of the Commonwealth that would encourage greater corporate decentralisation and what can be learned for corporate decentralisation approaches, so how we can bring business with me. And I just want to give you one example of this. In my local community of Bright last week, I met a woman who's got a consultancy company working for Google out of Bright. So she does it all by telecommunications. One of my volunteers this week works with the Victorian Department of Agriculture. The whole Victorian Department of Agriculture, he's part of the HR team and he works from Rutherglen. So we've got so many examples where we do this joined-up, clever decentralisation approach that we could bring to Parliament and work to it from there. So in closing, my comment is the time is now, the right people are here, the will of the Parliament's together, and I say to all my colleagues throughout rural and regional Australia, come and join us. This is going to be the most exciting thing we do for the next 8 months. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
Question is the motion